I don't often go for proxy models, but I actually do like them a lot. And that might seem a little paradoxical, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Because if there's something I want it. I want the real version of it. And a proxy, by definition, is going to be a substitute for that thing. However, every once in a while, when I really like something, and all of a sudden there is a better version of the thing I already like, it's a match made in heaven. Now, better is subjective. Sometimes that means I just like the sculpt better. Sometimes I think it tells a better story. Sometimes I just think it's funnier. All this to say, I got a proxy Tyranid model. Last year, Games Workshop released a new model for the Tyranids with the Neuro Lictor, a spooky lone operative that answers the question, what if the xenomorph facehugger jumped on a Cthulhu? It's a wonderful model, and the internet got memey with it. I want at least 2 of these in my Tyranid army, so I got the Neuro Thicctor. When the internet saw the piercing claws and talons in the Cthulhu mouth, the internet did what the internet do and decided, smash. And the Neuro Lictor was born, and it is shockingly faithful to the original model, with, in my opinion, the perfect amount of cringe sprinkled on top. Now, to make it a part of my Tyranid army, I have to get these beasts on some bases. I paint Hive Fleet Behemoth, and I base my bugs in the jungle with some alien goodies like eggs laying around. So I gotta get these 50mm bases all filled up. And to do this, I'm gonna use tried and true cork. The Neuro Thicctor stands a bit taller than the Neuro Lictor, so I'm gonna use the base height to balance these out. I started out by super gluing down a layer of 1/8 inch cork and glued down the Thicctor, trying to get as much of her over the base as possible. It's a personal pet peeve of mine when a lot of the model hangs over the boundary of the base. It makes the model less fun to play with in game. I built up the surrounding area with some bits of rough cork, and I glued some of this to the rock she's standing on. Then for the Games Workshop model, I glued down some 1/4 inch cork to start the process of making him taller, using my chunky 1/2 inch cork to make a big old boulder. I used my Dremel tool to add a slant to the rock so he's leaning back so he fits over the base a little bit better. Then I mixed up some milliput. I squished this around the cork to blend the rocks together and fill in the base, dipping my fingers into my paint water so I could squish and smear the putty, blending it into the rock. I used a damp paintbrush to squish and smooth out the putty and get a texture going, and I used a piece of cork pressing in more texture while the putty was still nice and wet. Then I squished in some epic basing plants and alien eggs. I put some wood glue in between the decorations and sprinkled on some sand, and then I threw on some modeling putty onto the Neuro Thicctor's rock to give it a little more texture. Now my real and alternative Neuro Lictor are looking appropriate together, standing nice and proud on their big old bases. And you know what these models would look great in? A Joshi storage case. Joshi is the best in the biz for lightweight miniature storage, and they have done it again with the Joshi miniature storage case. The genius of this case is it combines all the best ideas into one. A durable cloth outer layer full of pockets, quick clasps on the door so you don't have to zip and unzip, and opening it up, the insides are rigid foam, making the whole shebang incredibly light and comfortable to carry or wear. Yes, this case is also an incredibly stylish and fashion-forward backpack with a bit of a story. We have been working with Joshi for years, and we were very excited when they showed us this new product. However, the first version wasn't 100%. We told Joshi about the issues, and they immediately reworked the case and fixed all the issues. And I can report the updated case has been chauffeuring my minis to and from dozens of pickup games, 2 RT tournaments, and an event, and it's worked perfectly. If you want to try out the Joshi miniature storage case for yourself, you can follow the link below and use our code EOB2024-1008 to get 10% off. A big thanks to Joshi for sponsoring this video and making the best army transport solution to help moments like me traveling and winning a Spearhead tournament possible. I got my Neuro Lictor and my Neuro Thicctor all built, ready to go, and I really like having both. I'm not sure which one I prefer. I'm really hoping that when I play with these guys, because the Proxy is very close to the original, just with a few dramatic changes, that when I'm playing these on the tabletop, people don't immediately notice. But when they do, they're gonna be like, what am I looking at? Now when it comes to painting my bugs, I am a very new Tyranid collector, and so I'm still in the learning/experimental stage of my painting process. For my Black Templar, it's taken about 10 years, so I'm hoping my Tyranids come together a little bit quicker than that. I do a Hive Fleet Behemoth, and I kinda do a 2-way color scheme. For battle bugs, I paint them red in classic Hive Fleet Behemoth, and support bugs, I paint them with sickly pink flesh like cave animals. They're not the frontline soldiers, so they don't have the tough red armor of my other models. I started out priming my minis in black and then spraying their Tyranid bodies with white, getting this everywhere. I like to use inks for this. It's super thin so it runs through my airbrush like a dream, and I don't have to worry about thinning. Then to start on the skin, I sprayed magenta from below. This tints the white beautifully. Then to further tint the skin, I'm using one of my favorite colors, raw sienna. This color adds a wonderful bit of warmth and is the perfect thing for skin. I've been using this on most models I paint and it adds a golden glow. I spray this over any leftover white paint, letting it mix with the magenta. After that, I came back in with white, spraying this in key spots like their heads, chests, and the tops of their arms to brighten them up. I love how the skin is looking. I have the exact colors I want, but I want to shade the recesses, and for that, I need a wash. I took Reikland Flesh Shade and Lamian Medium and I mixed them about 50-50, and here's where I made a little tactical error. This was not thin enough, and over top of my delicate airbrushing, it did turn my minis very orange. This was not the end of the world though. I still made my recesses nice and dark, and I came back in with my airbrush and sprayed some white ink to brighten them back up. With washes, it's always better to err on the side of caution. It's way easier to apply a second wash if the first one is too subtle than it is to unwash something. After a little brightening up with white, the skin was right where I wanted it. The Neuro Thicctor is a really interesting model on the tabletop. It is very much a utility bug. It's got a lot of good keywords too and a good number of wounds. It has a fun ability where if it manages to actually kill a character, which it could, it's got precision on its weapons, you get a CP. This would be really great against an army like Genestealer Cult. It'd also be funny because it's Tyranids versus Genestealer Cult. You'd be racking up the CP, but that is not the juice of this unit. Neuro Thicctor forces enemy units in the command phase to take a battle shock test, and if a battle shook enemy unit is within 12 inches of this gal, they're -1 to their attacks, but they're also +1 to be wounded army-wide. That is pretty fantastic. I see why people bring 1, if not 3 of these suckers to every single game. That is fantastic. And just in terms of a unit, it's not bad. I think I'm gonna have these backed up by some Von Ryan's Leapers. Even though they're not a character, they're gonna sorta have a bodyguard unit, and they kinda synergize nicely with the Von Ryan's Leapers because they get to heroic intervention for free. So if anything ever does decide to charge my little Neuro Thicctor, they can countercharge. It's a nice little 1-2 punch. I'm really starting to think that I'm gonna build my Tyranid army around the brain bugs and just force tons and tons of battle shock checks and pluses and minuses to stats and buffs and debuffs. I think that would make for a really fun playstyle, and it would let me play with some of the best Tyranid models, like the Neuro Thicctor, Neuro Tyrant, Screamer Killer Carnifex, maybe even a Norn Emissary. Oh, a Norn Emissary, done up in this style with the bazongas. I mean, now I'm picturing it, and I can't unpicture it. All right, it's time to work on the blue. Every Tyranid model I paint, I end up doing the blue a little bit differently. I don't think I've nailed it yet, but I think I'm getting close. For my Neuro Lictors, I'm gonna try laying down a bright saturated blue base coat first for all the armor bits. This is the most tedious part of painting Tyranids. I find using a nice sharp brush to do all the edges, and then filling in the panels with the big junky brush is most efficient. Now the base coating is done, and this blue is looking very flat next to the amazing values the airbrush skin gave me, so I need to bring this into the armor, starting with some airbrushing highlighting of light blue. Now it's time to bring this blue down to the dark blue of my behemoth color scheme with some thinned down Leviathan blue. The reason I base coated the blue is to make sure I got really saturated blue in the parts where the contrast paint is gonna be on thin. If I threw this over the skin color, you'd be able to see the other colors through the blue. Once the contrast was dry, I dry brushed some of my base coat blue and light blue over the armor, and it was looking pretty spicy. Now with the skin and armor done, my Tyranids are like 99% done. There's just a few little details like their brains. I used Army Painter Speed Paint Ghillie Doo, which is one of my favorite paints for magical sci-fi glow, and I mixed in some yellow paint into the speed paint to get a highlight color for the middle of the brain and to do edge highlights in the surrounding armor to help sell the glow, doing lighter and lighter layers. Now the skin could use just a little bit of attention. I used a very light red beige to add some highlights to the Cthulhu mouth, making little lines to make them look extra wormy. And around the joints, I used some watered down Carabrag Crimson to make these look redder, like the skin of these joints is a little bit thinner. And you know what else is a little thinner? That's right, EonsOfBattle.com. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find our merch, like the new Nick and Jay dice, and the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members will get a credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain packs or any previous pack we have ever made. For the month of Orktober, we have expanded on our Orc terrain with the Orc Rocket Factory. Fill your game boards with ramshackle walls and the Grizzly Gate with an explosive flare. Man the battlements of an Orc weapons workshop absolutely dripping with bombs, rockets, and pointy missiles. This modular terrain is fully compatible with our previous Orc brewery and the Octeris terrain and can be assembled in all sorts of shapes ready to detonate at a moment's notice. I think the Neuro Thicctor is gonna go down as one of the classic Warhammer 40k memes, right up there with Breadnought, the Commissar, drive me closer, I want to hit them with my sword. The infamous Corn, when life gives you lemons, blood for the blood god. It's what 40k players do, because yes, the world is expansive and deep and grim dark, but it's also really, really funny. 40K is funny, and I love when the community takes a hold of that humor and just vomits it onto the tabletop. And speaking of vomit, I need to paint the bases. And they're gonna be green. That's why it's vomit-like. For basing my armies, I like to find the simplest, most bang for the buck techniques, as I'll have to do this literally hundreds of times. I started out airbrushing some brown around the edges, and then an airbrushing of watery dark green. This pools on the base, flowing in between the details and sand, and gets everything ready for the real base color, neon green ink. This tints the green and brown and looks incredibly vibrant over the white prime I did that splashed down onto the base. Then I took my Cadian flesh tone wash, thinned down, and put this over the plants and leaves to bring some saturated orange into the green to make it look more alive. Then I hit the eggs with a little gray and a little red over top. I don't think Tyranids lay eggs, but it feels right. Having painted up these two models, I actually like the meme one better, but you do need the OG Games Workshop version to really appreciate the joke, because the internet saw this model and thought smash. And then a very, very good sculptor decided to take that joke and run with it. What really tickles me about this figure is the level of talent that went into this. This model is amazing, but also incredibly memey. And just the idea of somebody with that much skill and experience deciding to work this hard on the joke is beautiful. Not only is this model a great meme, but it has really good utility because now I have two Neuro Lictors, but they look very different from one another. And that's a tricky thing to do with some of the more modern Games Workshop models that are very monopose. The Neuro Lictor looks amazing, but it'd be pretty lame to have 3 Neuro Lictors all with identical poses. Now I've got 2 very distinct and different Neuro Lictors to add to my rapidly growing Tyranid Brainbug army. Let me know in the comments below what Tyranid model I should add next. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.